I deliver babies for a living. Every single morning, I catch new life with these two hands, and every single night, I drive home down Crockett Street and slow the car without meaning to. There is a funeral home on that block. The lights in the back stay on late. Someone works in there long after the rest of Lubbock goes dark, and for reasons I cannot explain to myself, I think about her. I say her because Diane told me. Diane knows everything about everyone. She is the kind of woman who collects information the way other people collect houseplants, effortlessly, constantly, without ever being asked. "You need to get out," she told me Thursday morning, snapping a latex glove off her wrist like she was making a legal declaration. "The Blue Ember. Tonight, the quartet is back. I have a 7 a.m. shift Friday. You have a pulse, Clara. Use it." I went. Of course I went. Diane has a way of making resistance feel like embarrassing yourself privately. The Blue Ember smelled the way it always does, like cedar and spilled bourbon and something warm underneath both. Rain was coming down hard outside, and the Thursday crowd was smaller than usual. Everyone pressed a little closer to the low light. The quartet was already into their second number, slow and aching, the kind of jazz that gets into your sternum and stays there. Diane grabbed us drinks. I found a spot near the wall, and that was when I saw her. She was sitting alone at a corner table, a dark blazer, blonde hair, and gray eyes that were almost closed. Not sleepy, absorbed. Like the music was something she was reading carefully, privately, and did not want interrupted. There was a half-finished drink in front of her that she had clearly forgotten. I did not mean to stare. I stared anyway. At some point in the middle of the third number, she turned her head, just slightly, and looked directly at me. Not the way people accidentally catch someone looking. Deliberately. Like she had been aware of me the entire time and was only now choosing to acknowledge it. Neither of us smiled. I did not look away. Neither did she. The music moved around us, low and aching and patient, and for reasons I still cannot fully account for, that felt like more than enough. Her name was Emma Young. I found that out approximately 4 minutes after Rafe decided to play social coordinator. Rafe is a regular at the Blue Ember, the kind of man who knows everyone and means well in the most inconvenient possible way. He materialized between us like he had been waiting for an excuse, clapped a hand on Emma's shoulder, said her name, said mine, gestured between us like he was introducing 2 continents, and then immediately wandered off toward the bar to order another round he would forget to return with. We stood there. The quartet played on. "He does that?" Emma said. Her voice was lower than I expected, unhurried. "Does it work?" She looked at me evenly. "You're still standing here." I could not argue with that. We found a table without discussing it. Emma sat across from me and folded her hands on the surface in a way that was completely still. No nervous energy, no performance. She told me what she did plainly, the way you state a fact about weather. Embalmer. The funeral home on Crockett Street. 7 years. She watched my face when she said it, clearly accustomed to the small flinch most people gave. I did not flinch. I was too busy thinking about those late lights through the window. "You work with the dead," I said. "I care for them," she corrected, quietly but clearly. "There is a difference." I told her what I did. Something moved behind her gray eyes, a recognition, a shift. "So you catch them at the beginning," she said. "I catch them at the end. Someone has to." The simplicity of it landed somewhere in my chest and stayed there. I reached for my drink. The quartet slowed into something almost unbearably tender, the kind of melody that makes a room smaller, and I became very aware of how close we were sitting, of the way Emma's gray eyes held mine without any of the usual social machinery running behind them. No performance, just attention. It was that attention that made me stand up. I told her it was late, which was only partly true. I told her it was good to meet her, which was entirely true. I did not tell her that I needed air because something in my chest had started doing things I was not prepared to examine in a jazz bar on a Thursday. The rain had softened to a mist by the time I got to my car. I sat with both hands on the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. Down the road, eventually Crockett Street waited in the dark. I did not slow down this time. I drove faster, which probably meant the same thing. Lubbock is not a small city. I had lived here 9 years and managed to convince myself of that every time I needed space from something. But the week after the blue ember, the city shrank to the size of a problem I could not stop turning over in my hands. Monday, Emma at the late-night diner on Main. She was in a booth by the window, reading, a cup of coffee going cold beside her. She did not see me. I took my order to go. Wednesday, Emma at the hospital. She was in the front corridor handling paperwork for a transfer case, speaking to the front desk administrator in that same unhurried voice, and I walked past the hallway entrance twice before taking the long way to the elevator, like a woman with no dignity left to protect. Saturday, the farmer's market. That one I could not walk away from. She was standing at a stall, examining a bunch of dried lavender with the focused attention she seemed to give everything, and she looked up before I could redirect. And that was that. We walked the stalls together without either of us suggesting it. It simply happened, the way water finds a level. She bought the lavender and a jar of local honey. I bought apples I did not need. We talked about the quartet, about a particular progression in the second number that had stayed with both of us. Then somehow we were talking about work, about what it means to be present for someone at the exact moment they are most unguarded, most raw, most entirely themselves. Every birth is a crisis that becomes a miracle, I said. Sometimes in about 90 seconds. Every arrangement I make is the last thing someone's family will remember clearly, she said. I think about that with every detail. There was no morbidity in it. Just wait. The honest kind. At some point, our hands came close, reaching for the same market railing, and neither of us moved away quite as quickly as the situation required. Emma looked down at the near contact, then up at me, and the pause that followed was long enough to mean something, without either of us having to say what. I should get back, she said finally. Yeah, I said. Me too. Neither of us moved for another full moment. Then she smiled, small and private, like something she had not entirely planned on, and turned to go. I stood there holding my unnecessary apples and watched her walk away, and thought about 9 years in a city I had always called large enough. Diane called that evening. I answered before the second ring, which told her everything. You've described her blazer twice this week, Clara. I stared into my coffee cup. It offered me nothing. I'm fine, I said. Diane laughed the way people do when they are absolutely certain you are not. The blackout hit on a Tuesday, the third week of October, cold coming down hard off the plain the way it does in Lubbock when autumn finally means it. One moment my lamp was on. The next, the whole building dropped into a darkness so complete it had texture. I found a candle. I found matches. I sat on my couch and listened to the building settle around me and told myself I was fine with my own company, which was only about half true on a normal night. Then I heard movement in the hallway. I opened my door with the candle in my hand and found Emma Young standing 2 feet away, also holding a candle, also just having opened her door. She looked at me the way she had looked at me at the farmer's market railing, like she was not entirely surprised, but was taking a moment to decide what to do about it. You live here, I said. 2 floors up, she said. The elevator is out. I stepped back. She came in. We sat on opposite ends of my couch with a single candle on the coffee table between us. And the darkness did what darkness does. It removed options. There was no hallway to take the long way down, no unnecessary apples to hold, no jazz crowd to disappear into. There was just the candle and the cold outside, and Emma's gray eyes catching the light in a way that made thinking clearly feel like an unreasonable expectation. She spoke first. I've been avoiding you. I know, I said. You knew? I took the long way to the elevator twice on Wednesday. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. More like recognition. I didn't want to want something I wasn't sure I could keep, she said, and set her candle down carefully, like the sentence had taken something out of her. The room was very quiet. Outside, wind moved against the windows. I looked at her in the low light, this woman who worked at the end of everything and spoke about it without apology, and something in me stopped pretending to deliberate. I leaned in slowly, and she met me halfway, and the kiss was soft and unhurried and tasted like something I had been driving past for months without stopping. She exhaled against my mouth like she had been holding that breath since Thursday at the jazz bar. When we pulled back, the candle was still burning. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then the lights came back. All at once, lamps and kitchen, and the little light above the stove, the whole apartment flooding back into itself. Emma blinked in the sudden brightness. I reached over and took her hand before either of us could think too carefully about it. She turned her palm up and held on. The silence between us had changed its texture entirely, and we both knew it, and neither of us reached for words to cover it over. Some things are better left in the light exactly as they are. It was Diane who told me. Of course it was Diane. She had heard it from the hospital administrator who handled the transfer paperwork, who had heard it from someone at the funeral home. Emma Young had accepted a position in Austin, senior embalmer at one of the largest funeral groups in Central Texas. A significant step up. Applied for months ago, apparently, long before a rainy Thursday at the Blue Ember, long before a blackout and a candle and a hand held open on a couch. I sat with that information for exactly 1 hour before I went to Emma's door. She opened it and read my face and did not pretend she did not know why I was there. "You were going to tell me," I said. "Yes." "When?" She looked at the doorframe. "When I was certain it was real." "Which part?" I said. "Austin or this?" She did not answer that directly, which was its own kind of answer. I left without raising my voice. That was the worst part, the quiet of it. No door slammed, no scene. Just me walking down 2 flights of stairs in a building I now associated entirely with her. Diane found me on the hospital roof at midnight. I was not crying. I was just sitting on the low concrete ledge staring at the flat Texas sky, which goes on forever out here in a way that is either comforting or devastating, depending on the night. She sat beside me without commentary, which was the most generous thing she had ever done. "She didn't tell me because nothing was certain," I said eventually. "That's probably true," Diane said. "It doesn't help." "No," she agreed. "It really doesn't." I went home and slept badly, and worked a full Friday shift and caught 2 new lives with these 2 hands, and drove home down Crockett Street in the dark, and did not slow down. I was getting good at not slowing down. Saturday morning at 7 a.m., someone knocked on my door. Emma stood in the hallway holding 2 coffees, no blazer, hair loose, looking like a woman who had prepared nothing and come anyway. She had the particular expression of someone who has made a decision they cannot fully explain but are entirely certain about. "I turned it down," she said. I looked at her. "Emma." "Not for you," she said quickly, and that careful honesty was so completely her that something in my chest came loose. "For me. Because I was trading something real for something theoretical, and I only figured that out at about 4 this morning." I stepped back from the door. She came in. She set the coffees on the counter, and neither of us reached for them. The morning light came through my windows in long amber strips, and the whole apartment felt different with her in it. Warmer, more like somewhere worth returning to. We moved toward each other the way we had been moving toward each other since the very first Thursday, slowly, without pretending there was any reason left to stop. What followed was quiet and unhurried and entirely ours, the kind of closeness that asks nothing and holds everything. Afterward, I lay still and listened to her breathe beside me, steady as a kept promise, and thought about all the months I had driven past Crockett Street without once stopping. The coffees were cold by the time we got to them. Neither of us minded even a little. We went back on a Thursday. Same bar, same autumn rain, same quartet settling into their first number as we came through the door. The only difference was that this time Emma's hand was already in mine before we crossed the threshold, easy and unhidden, like something we had always done. Rafe was at the bar. He raised his glass without surprise. Some people are more perceptive than they appear. We found a table, not the corner where Emma had sat alone, not the wall where I had stood and stared. A new spot, closer to the music, where the sound came through clearest. Emma ordered for both of us without asking, because she had been paying attention to what I drink since the very first night, which I was only now understanding. We were halfway through the second number when I noticed Mrs. Paulson sitting 3 tables over in a wool cardigan, sipping something amber, looking entirely unsurprised to see us together. She caught my eye and raised her glass with the composure of a woman who has been waiting for slow people to catch up for decades. "She knew," I said. "She told me your name before I ever learned it myself," Emma said. "First week I moved in." I stared at her. "How long have you lived in this building?" Emma looked at me with those calm gray eyes. 14 months. 14 months. I had driven past that funeral home for 9 years, slowed down without knowing why, built an entire private mythology around the late lights on Crockett Street, and Emma Young had been 2 floors above me for over a year, also taking the long way, also keeping her distance, also sitting alone at jazz bars absorbing music like a private language. I did not know whether to laugh or feel the full weight of all that almost. I felt both. "You could have knocked on my door," I said. "So could you," she said simply. The quartet eased into the melody from the very first night, that slow, aching progression that gets into your sternum and stays. I recognized it immediately. So did Emma. She turned to look at me at the exact moment I turned to look at her, and we held that for a beat, the way you hold something you do not want to put down. I reached over and took her hand on the table. She turned her palm up without hesitation, her thumb settling against mine like it had always known the way. The rain came down soft against the windows. The music moved around us, low and patient and unhurried. Emma leaned close and her mouth found mine briefly, warmly, with the quiet confidence of a woman who has finally stopped treating good things like they might be taken away. Around us, the bar carried on. Nobody looked. Nobody needed to. I thought about new life and late lights and all the roads we take twice before we understand where they go. I held Emma's hand in the low light of the blue ember and let the music finish what that first Thursday started. Some beginnings just take a little longer to arrive.